Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the May 15th special edition of the Wilmington Board of Selectmen. All members are present. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, we do not have any treasury warrants or minutes to approve, so we'll move right into our appointments. For those of you not aware, we're gathered here this evening to interview two finalists for our Finance Director, Town Accountant position. As you all know, Mr. Morris is retiring in July after many years of service to the town, and we are here to interview two finalists to replace Mr. Morris. And so before we do that, I want to just let the board know that I think that we will follow probably the same format that we did back in July, or June of last year rather, where we had public interviews with town council. If you remember, we interviewed multiple law firms for our new town council. And so I think that we'll probably follow the same format in which we'll allow the candidates to make some opening remarks, and then we can have the board members ask questions. They could be offered a closing statement if they choose, and then perhaps we'll take a short recess in between candidates. And then after we interview both candidates, we can have a board discussion about how we want to proceed. Does that sound good with everybody? Okay. And so if we want to invite the first candidate in, I'll throw it over to our manager, Mr. Hull, who can give us a little background about how we arrived at this moment in time. Mr. Hull?
Yes, so the process that we went through first involved issuing a notice for this position. It was advertised in the MMA Beacon, actually on their online site, and we received 11 candidates at the time, and the committee that was established to serve as a screening committee consisted of myself, Kerry Colburn-Dion, the assistant town manager, Mike Morris, the town accountant, and Jonathan Eaton, member of the Board of Selectmen. We reviewed the resumes, narrowed them down to a couple at the time, and we're in the process of arranging or making a recommendation to the board to conduct interviews. One of the candidates at the time decided to withdraw their application, and as a result, we re-advertised on April 16th for this position, received another 9 candidates for this Finance Director, Town Accountant position. Again, the screening committee met, whittled down the candidates to a short list, and then interviewed those candidates and brought forward one additional candidate, ultimately bringing to the Board of Selectmen the 2 candidates that you will be interviewing this evening.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Hull. So first up, our first interview is with Mr. Brian Perry, and we want to welcome you, Mr. Perry, here to Wilmington. And just to give you a little idea how it's going to go here, we're going to offer you the opportunity to make an opening statement, introduce yourself to the town. I want to let you know that you're live on television. There's about 25,000 people at home watching, so don't be nervous. And many more on the replay tomorrow online. But we certainly welcome you here, and I know that my colleagues will be eager to ask you some questions, and then certainly if there's anything at the end you want to offer for a closing, we will certainly welcome that opportunity as well. So welcome, and I want to give this opportunity for you to introduce yourself to the board.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome.
Congratulations on your appointment.
Thank you.
First off, I wish to thank the Board of Selectmen for having me here. I got to meet Selectman Eaton, Town Manager Hull, as well as Mr. Morris and Assistant Town Manager throughout the screening process, and I'm very grateful to have the opportunity to present myself in front of you guys. Just as a little bit of background about myself, I'm a lifelong North Andover resident. I went to high school there. I live in the town still. My wife's a teacher in North Andover High. She's been a special ed teacher for 14 years and counting there. we got 3 girls going through the education system, so I'm not going anywhere. I'm not looking to move. I'm going to be in this area for my life, just to get that out of the way. As far as a little bit of background about myself, education-wise, after high school, I went to Merrimack College. I studied business administration there. Once I was out of college, I worked in the insurance industry for a few years. I started off in the as a claims adjuster in that field, and then transitioned into the systems administration side. While I was there, I worked on a nationwide rollout for the Fortune 100 company that I had worked at that time of new claim software. While I was working at, it was Liberty Mutual was actually the company, just to, I guess, connect the dots on that one. While I was at Liberty Mutual, I decided that I did want to take on more responsibility. So at night, I went to school. I went to Suffolk University. At night, while working full-time, got my master's with a concentration in accounting. That kind of helped open the door to transition into more of a financial side profession for me. I worked at Lawrence General Hospital. I was the one financial analyst in the fiscal department at LGH, which is the busiest hospital north of Boston, one of the busiest emergency rooms in the state. So there was a lot of work while I was there. I also, at that point, after completing my master's, I figured since I wasn't busy enough, I went to take and pass the 4 exams for certified public accountant in the state of Massachusetts. So I'm a CPA licensed in the Commonwealth. I had also was appointed in the town of North Andover. Again, I said I grew up there, I lived there. They needed a member for their board of assessors. That's kind of how I transitioned into the municipal finance side of the world. 6 or 7 years ago, they needed someone in there. They had a three-member board. They had a vacancy at the last minute, and I was lucky enough to fall into it. It's kind of opened the door for me into the municipal world, and it's been a godsend. I've been a board member in North Andover for, as I said, almost 7 years now. I'm the chairman of the board for, I believe it's my 3rd year being chairman in North Andover. In April of 2016, I was appointed to be the city auditor in the city of Lowell. As you know, city of Lowell is the 4th largest city in the state. I serve as the city auditor. I report to all 9 city councilors in the city of Lowell. I'm responsible for the payroll function and the accounts payable function. I have 7 full-time employees that report to me directly. We run AP checks every week with the exception of basically timing-wise the holidays and year-end. We run payroll for nearly 4,000 employees, counting the school department weekly. So it's a pretty busy office. There's a lot that goes through it. Myself, as the city auditor, it's a title synonymous for town accountant, town or city comptroller. It's a different flavor, basically, depending on where you are. But on the city side, it's referred to as the city auditor. It's similar duties that a town accountant would take on. I'm responsible for basically all the accountant functions. I'm responsible for the state reporting, the federal reporting. So at the year end with the DOR, I work very closely with our DOR rep in the city of Lowell, who's actually also the rep in the town of Wilmington, Ms. Colburn. I am responsible for completing the Schedule A, the balance sheet checklist, working with the DOR and the DLS to have free cash certified. I work on the cash reconciliation. The statement of indebtedness, I'm responsible to sign off on all that, as well as work collaboratively with the other finance administrators in the city for the tax recap. Elsewhere in the city, as I said, I oversee 7 full-time employees. I think with the new transition of this role, I think a management style is very critical to being able to hit the ground running and succeed in this position. Just to give you a background as to how I work and how I operate, is I believe I'm pretty easy to get along with. I'm open, I'm easygoing. I have a door in my office that's always open. I don't want to be a roadblock or an impediment for anyone that I know is working on a project. If I can take 10 minutes out of my day, 15 minutes out of my day to help someone make progress in the tasks they're working on, I believe it's time well worth it for me. As I said, I'm open, I'm easy to talk with people. I believe in holding myself accountable. If I make a mistake, I think the easiest thing to do is to admit it, to explain it, and to move on. I've never thought that trying to obfuscate, trying to make it cloudy, trying to muddy the waters or blame someone else, that's never going to get you anywhere, because the biggest thing, whether it's myself or someone else that caused any mistake, is to figure out what the problem is and figure out the best way to get to the solution of that problem. I believe in working collaboratively. I believe in having open communication with the people I work with, the people I work for, and the people that work for me. I think that communication's critical, just so everyone knows what's going on. There might be issues that they're not aware of that's going to impact their daily job duties. I think when everyone works collaboratively, there's a synergy in there that, A, provides a better work product, and B, provides a better work experience for that employee. And as I said, because I wasn't busy enough, I'm also serving, and the town of North Andover has an OPEB committee, so I've been serving on that. I'm actually going to be presenting to North Andover Selectmen along with their assistant town manager in 2 weeks from yesterday. We'll be presenting in front of the Board of Selectmen for the town of North Andover for the findings for their OPEB report. And I'm also responsible for serving in the Lowell Retirement Board, ex officio based on my position. So Lowell's one of the towns that has their own retirement board. I understand you guys work with the Middlesex Retirement Board. I guess that's just, a brief synopsis as to how I got here.
Great. Thank you very much. Obviously, a very impressive resume, so we
Thank you.
appreciate that introduction. I want to offer each of my colleagues the opportunity to ask questions, and certainly the manager if he has some. And so if you don't mind, we'll
No, go
dive
ahead.
right into the questions.
Absolutely.
So if anybody has questions they'd like to start us off? Well, Mr. McCoy?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening. I just want to ask you a couple of quick questions, and I know my colleagues probably have them as well. How would you approach the first few weeks and months of this job if you were appointed by the Board of Selectmen?
I think the first few weeks, even in the first couple of days, the first critical thing I have to do is I have to get to know the people, not just who would be reporting with me, who'd be working with me, the people in the building. I'm going to need to know, basically make myself available to them to kind of let them understand who I am, who they're working with, as well as for me to understand who they are, what they do, and basically one of the key things that helps make a town or city run smoothly is knowing who you need to work with and who to work with in order to facilitate the work, basically, whether it's through developing requirements for purchasing, for, there's obviously a litany of tasks that are done on a day-to-day and week-to-week basis in the town, and one of the critical steps is understanding who they are and what they do and who to get answers from. Another critical step that I would need to take is I need to familiarize myself with the book, the chart of accounts, the financials for the town, and get to know that. I mean, that's obviously one of the critical parts, is being the expert for the town's finances, and that's a big first step, is getting my hands around the town's financials, around the town's chart of accounts, and learning the system before it transitions through to Munis.
All right, thank you. Mr. Chairman, how do you want to do it? I have a couple questions. You want to just do one at a time?
No,
or-
feel free to ask as many as you'd like.
Oh, okay, I just got a couple more. I'll let
Yeah,
my
no, go right
colleagues. Where do you see yourself in 5 years?
Hopefully as the finance director and town accountant here. I think it's a very attractive position. It's something that they don't come around often. As you can see, this one hasn't been open for a long time, and good ones like this, they don't come open. It's a very attractive job, in my opinion, and I believe it's a job worth keeping.
And I'll just have one more quick one. I'll just yield to my colleagues. What about career challenges? Have you ever faced, and how have you dealt with them relative to career challenges? How do you face them, and how do you deal with those?
Yeah, I guess there's a lot of different ways I can go with that. I think one, as I tried to explain from the onset, is out of college I'd worked in the insurance industry. It's an industry where my father had worked for decades. My family's been in the insurance industry. There's a insurance agency in the town that I live in that has my last name attached to it. So I'm the black sheep for going into accountancy, I guess. But in order to do that, in order to transition, in order to take on challenges of not enjoying the field, is I have to decide how I can build a bridge to get to where I want to be. That included going to school at night at Suffolk University. That included, honestly, accelerating my course load there, where I graduated a year earlier than a lot of my cohorts, in order to take the next steps that I could career-wise. Taking the steps to study at night to get my CPA. Honestly, what I had to do is I had to wake up at 5 in the morning, study for an hour while my wife and my kids were sleeping. I'd work a full day. I would study at lunch, and then when everyone went to bed, I'd study again at night, take practice tests, and then take the exam. It's honestly, I'm not sure how I did it at the time. I'm not going to be too excited to do that again, why I keep my continuing ed credits
Yeah.
up to date. My license is already renewed through 2021. But I believe that working hard and developing a plan is one of the best ways to to deal with career adversity, and honestly, you have to figure out how you can build that bridge if you're looking to transition. I think you have to have a well-thought-out plan, and you have to execute on it.
All right, I appreciate it. Mr. Chairman, I'll yield to my colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Kyra?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Yeah, hi, Mr.
Hi.
Perry, how are you?
I'm doing great. How you doing?
Very impressive resume.
Thank you.
Just a quick question. I was interested in hear you slip in Munis, that you
Yes.
have some involvement. Your City of Lowell works with Munis?
City of Lowell's been a client of Munis for about 20 years, is my understanding.
Okay.
We are, I use Munis obviously on a daily basis. I need to know it very well in order to get the work done that I have to do.
Right.
We use it, we use it for procurement, I use it for all the financial reporting. I use it for a lot of, again, I'm in it for probably 8 hours a day, if not longer.
So it's good that you're familiar with it,
I'm
because,
familiar with it, and the City of Lowell was the second city in the state that actually had the upgrade to their most recent version. So we're working through some of the kinks that come with that, and it's been an experience, but we've gone through a couple upgrades in my time there, so yes.
so that's good to hear as well, because we're going from SoftWrite to Munis.
Yes.
And I wanted to ask if you had any conversion experience, and it sounds like you may have.
We've worked on upgrades. There've been 2 pretty sizable upgrades. But there's always, I guess we've had some of the smaller ones, which are almost the equivalent of when your phone tells you to do an upgrade and you put your phone down for 10 minutes, where there's not a lot of changes. It's essentially bug fixes, that sort of thing. We've gone through, I'd say, at least a handful of those usually in March or October, depending on timing. You'd usually do one of those just to kind of get some of the kinks out of the system. But we've gone through 2 pretty sizable upgrades, going from, not that it's going to mean much to the board or to the listeners at home, but we've gone from Munis version 10.5 to 11 up through 11.3 up to now their most recent version is now titled 2018, as far as the calendar year. So I've gone through that. It does take a great degree of testing in a training environment, which does take time away from your work schedule too, but you have to put that time in on the training side to ensure that the product you're going to work with isn't going to give you the headaches down the road when you flip the switch.
Great. Just maybe another question on difficult issues. You have 7 employees that are under you. Any difficult issues that have come by you, and how you handle it? Or
The people who work with me, the 7 direct reports that I manage, have been with the city for varying degrees, from a handful of years to a couple of them that have been up to 30 years. They all know what they're doing with their job. They all know what's expected of them, and I try to just make sure that everything is going as it should. If there's training, guidance, or questions that need to be answered, obviously I'm always there to provide that. As far as issues go, there's nothing performance-wise has ever been an issue. There's little things here where people may try and, I guess, take time here or there. And you just have to be cognizant of when people want to take time. They've all earned time off, and you just have to kind of make sure that you manage the schedules to make sure that there's coverage in all aspects for the city, so we can provide the service to the city's residents.
And I notice you have experience with the assessor's office, so this new role is going to include supervising over the treasurer's office and the assessor's office as well.
Yes.
And and you mentioned about reconciling the books and things of that nature. How often does that process monthly with you?
The reconciliation of the cash book is done monthly.
Okay.
It's, ideally, as I said, we run payroll weekly, we run accounts payable weekly, and whenever we get to that point, the goal was always to at least work to reconcile it almost on a weekly basis, just so there's less hiccups. As you go on, if you start trying to do a couple months at a time, you're looking at a bigger span of issues that can go wrong, variances that you have to tie out, and that's always a challenge, is once you let it lag, it broadens the scope of the amount of work you have to do, and it increases the number of needles you have to find in that haystack. So as long as everyone knows what their responsibilities are, the schedules are, and you stick on top of it, it makes life a lot smoother on that regard.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kyra. Mr. Eaton?
Thank you, Mr. Perry, for being here. I know that the screening committee had interviewed you back on April 3rd, and I know you've been very patient with us as you've waited for tonight, and I do appreciate that.
Thank you.
I'm going to read to you just a short portion of our most recent independent auditor's report that ended June 30, 2018.
Okay.
The town's liabilities and deferred inflows of financial resources exceeded its assets and deferred outflows of financial resources at the close of the most recent fiscal year by over 16.1 million total net position. Almost 35 million represented a deficit net position of governmental activities, and almost 18.9 million represented net position of the business type activities. It's a two-part question. First, is this cause for panic? And second, speaking more broadly, can you speak to the usefulness of a condensed statement of net position in assessing a municipality's fiscal strength?
I think I'll try and answer both those questions as I can. I think I'd hate to use the answer, it depends, but there's a lot more that will go into assessing a town's financial well-being than simply looking at the highlights from the net position. I don't believe it would be cause for concern off the top of my head based on most recent GASB changes, GASB 75. Essentially is going to throw everyone's financial statements into a state of shock, more or less. They're taking, for those of you who are not familiar with it, the most recent ending FY18, the newest GASB principle, as I stated, GASB 75, is basically going to be adding onto towns and cities' financial statements their OPEB liabilities. What the OPEB liability is basically is retiree health insurance, more or less. That's one of the biggest. There might be some dental, vision, that sort of thing, but the biggest thing is trying to get your hands around retiree benefits that may not be due this year, they're not going to be due in 5 years, they're going to be due in 20 and 30 years. And trying to put a dollar figure on that is a challenge for the actuaries that are most equipped to do it. I think, as I said, it's thrown a lot of distress into financial statements. It's something that, as I said before, I serve on the OPEB committee in the town of North Andover. They're looking to try and get ahead of the curve when the rating agencies are starting to review their financials and say, what are you doing, what have you done, and what is your plan to essentially curb this liability and get it under control before you're taking on massive debt year over year just to pay the OPEB liability for those retirees. So that's the first one. The second one is trying to, I guess, differentiate on the activity between the government activity and the net business activity. Was that the second part of the question?
I think you actually answered both questions within the same one. The first was just, is this cause for panic? And the second was, could you speak to just the usefulness in taking that one condensed statement of net position and then speak to, is that really bottom line what the town's position is, or is there more to it? I think you spoke.
No, and there's more to it. And for those of you who aren't well-versed in reading the financial statements either, one of the best things you can use to educate yourself is the notes. It's not necessarily as meaningful. I'll take that back. As to me, myself, as an accountant, as a city auditor, the changes of net position are very important to myself. But for people looking to educate themselves on the finances as well, reading through the notes is going to provide a wealth of information for you as far as what's going on in the town and their financials.
Okay. Could you describe any takes that you've taken to improve financial controls? Yes.
Financial controls are critical for making sure that a process is done on a consistent and repeated basis, done properly. I can give two examples off the top of my head. One is I review literally every in Munis before anyone's able to buy anything in the city. They need to have a purchase order to comply with 30B. So every requisition has to go in to be reviewed. I review literally every requisition from the school side and from the city side. It's going to come through the various CFOs on each end, come to myself, and then come to purchasing. So we need to make sure that before anything's purchased by the city, we need to make sure that we're in compliance with 30B, whether we're getting one quote, 3 quotes, we have a contract in place, or if it's off a state contract, et cetera, depends on a litany of circumstances. So I want to make sure that everything control-wise is done before goods or services are procured, ordered, delivered, and then you want to make sure when you get the invoice back in my office is when it's going through the accounts payable end, you're going to review that purchase order, review the quotes that was attached to it, and you're going to get the invoice. The invoice should be dated after the purchase order. It should match and tie out to what's in the requisition. Everything should be consistent, and you want to make sure that those goods were delivered and they were delivered as intended. That's just one control that makes sure that the reserve system in the city is functioning as it intends to. This allows to safeguard the city to make sure no one overspends their appropriation. As you guys go through your budget, which I believe was just passed last week, roughly, was it a week ago Saturday, I believe?
We're not going to deduct points from that, so.
10 days ago. No, I'm sorry. So when you go through the budget and you ever give everyone their line item, is to allow them to reserve what they need. It essentially encumbers the money to make sure that they don't overspend against their appropriation, which would be in violation of mass law. Other controls that have been instituted in place have come from challenges we've had in our school department. I'm not sure if anyone here reads the Lowell Sun. The Lowell School Department has had some challenges with their spending. One of them was on their usage of the school lunch fund. Essentially, to kind of give a Cliff Notes version, is that they had been using indirect charges in excess of what had been permitted by DESI, as well as just the timing of them being able to provide the invoices for payment. So one of the steps in place now is to provide oversight from my desk to the CFO in the school, the Assistant Superintendent of Finance is the correct title now. But anytime that there's any transfer that's going to be done between the school's general fund, the city's general fund for the school budget, along with the school lunch fund, is I explicitly need to have this approved by their school committee. I need to have the supports for the budget, the expenditures, everything tied out to the employee, to the work they were doing, to the job description, to make sure it fits as permitted by law and under DESI's approval. So,
You speak to your experience and current involvement in the preparation of citywide capital and operating budgets.
we are in the throes of the capital budgeting, which we have a 5-year plan, which gets revisited. It's a living, breathing document, which is a common phrase. But it's true, as far as the capital budget goes, is you don't just provide a 5-year highlight and then just kind of check stuff off. There's always needs that evolve. A city or town nothing sticks to its depreciation schedule as you hope to. There's always other needs that come up, and it evolves. We're about 2 weeks out from putting our budget presentation out to our city council, and it's, as you can understand, it's a $360 million budget for the general fund side of it. The capital budget has to be carefully crafted going forward, as Lowell had just voted to pass the loan order for a new high school a week ago. So that's a $340 million loan order with various contributions potentially from debt service as well as through the MSBA. So you have to there's a lot of moving pieces you have to factor in when you're deciding how much debt service the city can and should take on, the impact to the tax, as well as working with the departments. And the challenge with that and crafting the operating budget is the challenge that the best case scenario is you're going to be looking at level funding for a while and trying to work with those departments and understand what the needs are, what's critical, what they can work with, and find synergies with other departments to essentially bridge that gap.
Have you had an opportunity to review our fiscal 2020 budget?
Yes.
What are your initial thoughts?
What jumps out at me, obviously, is the undesignated, unreserved free cash, which sticks out. And I think it plays in part, too, what also jumps out to me is in the city of Lowell, we have 3 different enterprise funds. We had 4. The Lowell Memorial Auditorium at one point was an enterprise fund before. We had been basically putting more in than we could get out of it, and we essentially took over ownership of it as a city, as a line item in the operating account. But we have our water department, our wastewater sewer department, as well as a parking department, is enterprise self-sustaining funds in the city. And I think that's one of the things that jumps out, is that there's no true enterprise funds as delineated by the letter of the law. I think that does provide some sort of cushion for the free cash that I see. And in that, I guess, just to kind of give the background for it, is a lot of times when a fund is self-sustaining enterprise fund, is they should provide more revenue from user fees to at least balance out the expenditures for the year, if not provide some sort of, instead of free cash, it's called retained earnings. So there should be some sort of cushion that they would have to use to take on essential capital projects down the line for that fund. I would imagine that there's some of the departments that overproduce, or overproduce probably isn't the right word, overexcel, that provide additional revenue, probably adds to what's left in that free cash year over year. I do believe philosophically, looking through the budget, that I believe in the position of budget the expenditures conservatively, or trying to get those as true as you can and have the revenues basically pretty conservative. A lot of times you will see excess motor vehicle tax is the one that I seem to see citywide and townwide, that you do have a little bit room to play with it. The economy in some degrees helped provide that with newer cars, higher priced vehicles that provide high returns on the motor vehicle excise. So I think that as long as you have that ability to take on any potential supplemental expenditure with increased revenue from what you project, that always at least gives you some degree of backstop. Up in New England, as you know, snow and ice is dicey. It's tough to budget for. There's certain constraints by law that you have when you're budgeting for it. And one of the better practices is you need to essentially have, whether it's a reserve fund or over budgeting elsewhere, typically in health insurance is one you may find, depending on the levels of FTEs throughout the year, that you may be able to gain efficiencies if you need to transfer money to cover snow and ice at year end. So you're not carrying those expenditures over year to year. So I think those are some of the critical points, is when you look at the revenue, you always want to make sure that's conservatively estimated so that you can provide yourself some cushion. And the expenditures do have to be to some degree true. Looking through that as well as the annual report, I do see some turn back, which is signs of a well-crafted budget that gives the departments room to live by and live within, as well as departments who understand how to work together and work with the town.
Thank you.
So at this
Mrs.
point,
O'Mahony.
these are going to just be kind of follow-up questions to what everyone else has asked.
Okay.
They stole my thunder, but I don't mind. That's why I went last. Are you comfortable, or how have you gotten comfortable telling people no? And kind of tying into, how do you handle, or would you handle, potential conflict with department heads while still maintaining kind of a team environment?
I think that's an excellent question, and one of the, again, just to take a step back, as a city auditor in the city of Lowell, I essentially have a dotted line where I don't report to the town manager like 99% of the, or city manager, like 99% of the employees do, is I have that degree of independence where I report to the 9 city councilors. That gives me, that, I guess that at least sets me aside a little bit, so I'm in my own independent world, where I have the ability to say no. And when I tell people no, is I don't just tell them no because I'm trying to be mean or trying to just be difficult with them, is if I tell them no for a request, for a project, for a challenge, is I always back it up by, this is why. This is, Mass General Law dictates this. Our budget dictates this. You want to be able to have basically the agency principle that you're not saying no, you're not being difficult as a matter of your person, but there's a reason why. There's Mass General Law dictates you can't do this. City policy dictates you can't do this. We've gone through this. We understand best practice. We know how we want to operate. We know how we want to run, and this is how we're doing it because of X, Y, and Z. I think that helps in the explanation, and it helps you find common ground with the requester. You want to understand again why they're asking for something, but you want to understand the reasons why they're trying to do and what they're trying to ultimately get to. And I think that helps figure it out.
Great, thanks. And then the second question is kind of a follow-up to your review of the most recent town information that you were able to
Yes.
look at. You said kind of what you thought of some of the concerns and some of the strengths already, but I was kind of curious, based on kind of your cursory review, and obviously I'm not going to hold you to this, what would you see as changes to the free cash reserves or bonding policies, if any? You know, what do you think kind of you would want to maintain versus what do you think you would want to tweak?
I think that in my initial review of the town is I'll go on the Department of Revenue's website on the data bank reports, and I can go back for a couple of years and look at their certifications. And one of the things that jumped out to me was the lack of stabilization funds, which obviously has changed over the last couple of years. Just to kind of touch on the bonding piece of that is, I think for the most part, bonding agencies will take a big picture look and not just look at either what does the town have for free cash, or what do they have for stabilization reserves, as they want to basically look at it across the board and say, what do they have combined there? And I think that there's pluses to having funds that are in a stabilization fund. It's going to give you more access. You don't have to wait until the DOR is going to certify their free cash for the town or city to have any ability to call upon those funds. It's going to gain interest. That interest is going to stay in that fund. Obviously, the downside is those funds are designated for a specific purpose, short of being in a general stabilization fund. The DOR in the last 3 years has given towns and cities a great degree of leeway in being able to craft more stabilization funds as they see fit to fit the town's purpose. And that does give you some degree of flexibility, but obviously, once those funds are committed to it, that's how those funds should be spent. So that's obviously the drawback to it. But there is certainly, that was one of the things that jumped out, was the lack of usage of stabilization funds initially, and the lack of enterprise funds as well.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Hummel, do you have any questions for Mr. Perry?
Sure. Just in terms of your current position in Lowell, I'm wondering if you could provide for us a couple of accomplishments that you think are the most perhaps significant in your term as the city solicitor, city auditor.
Yes. No, I don't have any accomplishments as a city solicitor there. One of the big ones is, timing-wise, when I stepped in April of 2016. They had an interim city auditor at the time who was also basically serving as a consultant to the city manager. They had a good degree of turnover before that, where they had an auditor who was there for about a year or so, had left the position, and before that, there was an interim auditor who is actually the assistant city auditor still. The challenges to go along with it are, timing-wise. When you're stepping into that role at that time of year, you're hitting the budget for the next fiscal year. All of the prior year reports hadn't been completed, provided, and approved by the DOR. That's a challenge in that typically around Thanksgiving or so, if you don't have Schedule A, if you don't have your free cash approved, there's issues. The city can't appropriate any free cash because it hasn't been approved yet. The free cash that year was minimal anyways. The city's had a good deal of financial constraints from the get-go. But they can't call upon or utilize or appropriate any of the free cash because it hasn't been certified. And there's also challenges if all the financial reports haven't been received and approved by the DOR, is they could potentially use to their leverage of withholding city funding, and that would have been a drastic problem to the city. I was able to hit the ground running and figure out how to get this all accomplished timely. I've worked with, I think I've made very good relationships there in identifying who I need to work with and work in an open and honest manner in order to build relations, as I said, to build relationships and accomplishments. I think that if you ask any of the coworkers that I've worked with, any of the people that I've worked with or for, is the auditing department has been cleaned up, is that there's a good deal of local knowledge now into how the high-level reports are done, how they're produced, how they're provided, and how they're basically gauged over the year. There's a calendar to my job, and that calendar is met, if not exceeded, every year in working with the city, working with the state, and providing the reports that need to be done. I think that's one of the biggest things is that speaks to the quality and timeliness of work, is I'm able to work independently and get high-level, high-visibility reports done timely and through the satisfaction of the state.
Okay. And I guess taking perhaps the opposite perspective, if there was, can you speak to perhaps a situation in Lowell where if you had the opportunity to do over, so to speak, you would take a different approach in retrospect and perhaps describe that situation and what you learned from that experience?
Yeah, I think the biggest ones, I touched on it briefly, is working with the schools and relying upon their CFO to, I guess there's a delicate balance between what the school does and has the authority to do so. But my position, I could have pushed back more. I could have caused more problems, caused more tensions in an already tense situation to make sure it was done properly instead of letting the schools work with DESE and utilize the same rates that they had been for the past 2 years. In my conversations with the town staff here, is I don't believe that's an issue in the town of Wilmington. Everyone has a good working relationship. In the city of Lowell, it was there was an adversarial perspective taken between the school and the city at that time for those people that had been involved, and it wasn't a pleasant work environment despite people trying to work with them. And I think that it might sound bad that you might have to try and push back harder to make a situation worse, but it would make it ultimately better than it is at this point right now, where we're still cleaning up overages from the school expense side.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Certainly some good questions there. I just, one thing that comes to mind, you mentioned working with working with the city councilman in Lowell. You talked to me about the frequency of the times that you meet with them, they talk with them. I know that I've met with Mr. Morris in my short time as selectman, and I certainly learned a lot from him. Maybe give us a little background on your experience working with the city council.
Yeah, I'm required to attend their meetings. They meet on a weekly basis. They meet every Tuesday, 6:30 until fill in the blank, 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night. They meet weekly until we hit June. Once it's June, it's every other week from June, July, August, and September. So we're looking at, I'd say, I don't know, anywhere 30 to 40 meetings annually. That's just for the high level for the city council. I am in contact with them. It's not on a daily basis. There's certain counselors that may call me with questions, concerns, or issues. I also meet with them through various subcommittees as well. Those are more ad hoc. They're not on a regular routine basis, but they do meet. In the fall, going through some of the budget issues, we were meeting weekly for a while between the city and school finance subcommittees. Depending on the seasonality, it could be quarterly on subcommittee meetings. But the contact is there. I do see them every week, and we are in contact as often as needed.
Great, and just a follow-up to that, you mentioned having an open door policy, which is great, and we're certainly glad to hear that, and it sounds like you have a lot of communication with the city council. But how about residents? What about if residents have questions? I know in the past I've directed a resident for a question I may not have been able to answer about finance to the accountant, which he's been able to help them out. So if a resident has questions about town finances or OPEB or something like that, if you talk to
They
me
do,
about-
and they do come to me. They'll, more times than not, they'll go on the website. There's a contact the city auditor link. They click on that, and I will get it through email. And it's always a high priority to be responsive to them, to give them a call back, to give them an email, to work with them and answer their question. Because a lot of times the public comes from they have a different perspective towards municipal finance than those that have been doing it before. A lot of the terminology might be foreign. A lot of the reasons why you're doing something might not make sense to them, and you want to just explain what you're doing, why you're doing it, and how you go about it.
So just one last thing on that. If you had to take a guess, I'm not going to hold you to it, but on a weekly basis, on a monthly basis, how many times do you think you might hear from a resident or answer a question, have interaction, we have to answer a question from a resident?
Every couple of months, there might be a comment. It varies. There's other times that residents will call my line directly, which is fine with me. I don't mind answering the phone, explain everything I need to them. There's also other requests that come in that might be for different reasons that are more, less related to, financial concerns or guidance, but other issues related to the city that I will always work to direct them and make sure that they at least get pointed in the right direction to have their question resolved.
Great. Are there any questions from the board or from the manager here before we give Mr.
I would suggest if it certainly puts both of them on the spot, but Ms. Colburn Dion or Mr. Morris may have questions as well. I don't know if they do or not, but certainly their experience in the budgeting process.
Absolutely, we want to recognize both of them being here and certainly give you the opportunity if you...
No, not really. The follow-up has been very good. From our prior meeting when we first interviewed, so I'm quite satisfied between that meeting and this meeting as well.
And I would echo Mr. Morris's comments. I
Great.
think this was additive to what our interviews last month showed. So thank you.
Well, we thank both of you for being here as well. So if there are any other questions from the board, we certainly want to give you the opportunity to touch upon anything we might have missed. If you want to just give us a short closing, that would be great.
Yeah, no, I'll be brief. Again, once again, I just want to thank the board, thank the manager for having me back. As I said, I think it's a very attractive position. It doesn't come around that often, and it's the reason why this hasn't been open for as long as it does, I believe, speaks to the quality of that role. I believe that my background will help me hit the ground running, will help me succeed. Lowell has a great deal of different challenges that it poses to kind of give me more experience than you'd imagine in the the 3+ years I've spent there. I've had the unique opportunity to meet with a few of the members of the finance team last Friday, and I was given also the unique opportunity to speak with the accountant, as the independent auditor accountant, as well, to kind of be able to use as a sounding board for some of my questions, concerns that might not have been able to have been answered in this venue, and I'm truly appreciative of that opportunity. Again, I believe that my demeanor, my ability to work with individuals, to let them get their work done, to do their best work that they can, as well as provide any guidance needed, I believe will be an asset. And as I said before, through my experience, through my work, through my education, I believe I'd be an asset to the town. I hope that you give me that opportunity. Thank you.
Great. Well, I think I speak for all my colleagues, and we want to thank you for being here and for your eagerness to join our community and explain it to us what you have to offer. So we thank you for that. We do have another interview coming up, and then we're going to have some discussion on what we're going to do next. And certainly, I would imagine that we'll be in touch as soon as possible.
Certainly, thank you, and best of luck with your process.
Thank you very much.
Take care.
Appreciate you. Take care. Okay. I think we are not scheduled to meet with our next candidate until 7:30.
Yes.
So is everybody okay with a short recess?
Sounds good. Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Take care.
Do we need a motion to
I would, yeah, entertain
adjourn
that.
to recess? Is there a motion to adjourn to recess?
So moved.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded. All in favor? Everybody, welcome back. We'll call the meeting back to order. We are here for the purpose of tonight's 2 interviews for our finance director, town accountant position. If you're just joining us, we've already had 1 interview already with a Mr. Brian Perry, and now we welcome in our second candidate, final candidate for the night, a Miss Jennifer Finnegan. Am I saying that correctly?
Yes, yes.
Welcome.
Thank you.
We're glad to have you, and if you don't mind, I'll just explain how the process is going to work, and then certainly give you the opportunity to introduce yourself. We're going to give the opportunity to my fellow board members to ask questions. Perhaps the town manager might have a question. Anybody from the audience might have a question. So, and then certainly give you the opportunity to touch upon anything that we missed and something that you want to close with at the end. So, we want to start by welcoming you and thanking you for your interest in this position, and give you the opportunity to introduce yourself to the community. We want to let you know that you're live on television. They estimate there's about 25,000 people at home watching, so don't be nervous. But with that, welcome, and please introduce yourself.
Thank you, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. I appreciate you all staying late on a night that you don't usually have a meeting. My name is Jennifer Finnegan, as you had said. Right now I'm working as a treasurer collector for the town of Tingsboro. Do you want me to give you a little bit of my background, how I got here?
Sure,
Or-
we have your resume provided, but certainly anything you want to introduce yourself with, please, by all means.
Sure, sure. My municipal career started when I started working for a CPA firm, Justy and Hingston. They do primarily municipal audits. I worked for them on and off for about 16 years. I've been, as you can see from my resume, it gets a little choppy. I was the treasurer collector for the town of North Andover for 9 years. I've been a town accountant for the town of Rockport for a year. And now I've been the treasurer collector for the town of Tingsboro for 2 years. So almost my entire career has been municipal finance. I did have a couple years there when I was working for a small business when my kids were really little. So, and I was working part-time other than that. And that was accounting as well. I mean, that's all I really can do. So.
Oh, good. Well, thank you for that introduction. I know that some of my colleagues have questions, and so if you don't mind, we'll dive right in.
Sure, of
And
course.
anybody want to open up with some?
Actually, before we open up with questions, just to, for full disclosure, Jennifer and I know each other from a similar organization that we've been a part of, just so you know, but it won't make any, won't influence my decision, just so that everyone knows that.
Thank you for sharing. Okay. Are there any questions for Ms. Finnegan?
Can we start,
Mr.
Mr. Chairman?
McCoy?
Happy to do it. Good evening, Ms. Finnegan. How are you tonight?
Very good.
Just a
thank you.
couple of quick questions.
Sure.
how would you approach the first few weeks and the months of this job if you were appointed by the Board of Selectmen?
I would hold on to Mike with 2 hands, and I would ask him to definitely try to show me like everything he's done. I mean, he's done important, difficult tasks for probably, some of them 30 times or more. I would want to go over some of the internal control weaknesses. The auditors had a few little things that I would definitely want to go over with him. I've spoken to your auditors, and there are things that I'm very familiar with that are very common in many towns that I've worked with, things that I've corrected. So I'd want to see the backup for those things, what happened and, how best to go about correcting them.
All right, thank you.
So
Where do you see yourself in 5 years?
in 5 years, hopefully, I would be done the munis conversion. My goal in 5 years is to be done the munis conversion, as well as being a certified municipal Massachusetts accountant, as well as being certified like Chapter 30B procurement officer. Excuse me, I'm getting a little nervous. That is my goal in 5 years, but I definitely want to mention that I know that these things take time, and there are certain things that have to be in place. Everyone has full-time jobs to do. A full implementation takes time. And you don't want to just force things down. You don't just want to get it done to get it done. You want to get it done correctly. And so I know that these things, sometimes you have to take a step back and do your job, do the things that are the most important. I always think reconciling cash, reconciling receivables, making sure that your foundation is secure. You don't want to get behind on other things and make things worse in order to get ahead on into the conversion.
Thank you, Ms. Finnegan. I just have one more question. What about career challenges you have faced and how you have dealt with them?
There's always challenges. The most common challenge being a treasure collector is, people calling, screaming, and trying to diffuse this situation. I can't imagine as a town accountant, finance director, I would have to do that, hopefully, half as often, probably almost never. When I was a town accountant in Rockport, the phone hardly ever rang. I felt kind of like, oh, I have time to think. That was quite nice. But people just, they come, and my staff is at the front line, and they deal with the difficult people who are upset about it's always something else. It's never the fact that we sent you a tax bill. You know that you're going to get a tax bill. You know that you're going to get a demand, different things. So that's probably one of the common difficult challenges. There's all different types. Laws are always changing. Your computers break down. They crash. Every system I've ever worked on just takes you out. It's just done for the day or done for like the hour. Goes out, goes back up.
All right, thank you, Ms. Finnegan. I'll yield to my colleagues. All set, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you very much,
Ms.
Mr.
Finnegan.
McCoy.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
Yeah,
Mr.
just,
Kyra?
Question, have you worked with Munis before in the past?
I have done some munis work. I have worked with your current software, SoftWrite,
Right.
as a town accountant for a year, and for the last 2 years as a treasure collector. So I actually, because of my background, I put journal entries into the software. I'm not allowed to post to it because that's a definite segregation of duties. You don't want the same person it's just not in my role. But I do give all the backup to the accountant. But when I was in North Andover, we were doing a munis conversion, and the general ledger was converted. So I was able to go in and print reports and do some approvals and transfers, that sort of thing. But it is not fully implemented still in North Andover. So.
Oh, really? Have you ever worked on a conversion from one system to another?
I have not. No, but it's an accounting software.
Yeah.
Every software has to do the same thing. The accounting side, I mean, you have debits, you have credits, you have to have a trial balance, you have to have a general ledger, balance sheet, income statement. I mean, there are some things that are just across the board have to do the same thing. Every accounting software, from QuickBooks down to the most powerful municipal software, Munis, they all have to do the same thing. To get the data out of there, you might have to keep pressing buttons.
So you worked as the town treasurer and a town accountant,
Yes.
right? So how often do you deal with, when you were the treasurer, did you deal with the town accountant? And when you were the town accountant, how often did you deal with the town treasurer or the assessor? Did you reconcile the books monthly, weekly? How did that process work?
I like to reconcile cash and receivables monthly, not weekly, that would be too much. I have to, right now I'm waiting, because, so I'm not, right now, as a treasurer, and when I reconcile the receivables, I'm waiting for the accountant to finish posting, and as soon as she gives me the green light, she's done posting, I do the reconciliation for the receivables, and cash is reconciled as soon as we get the bank statements in. I like things done very timely. There's a lot of things that can go wrong if you don't do things timely. Banking, liability, if you don't reconcile your accounts within 60 days, you can incur more liability. There's been a lot of fraudulent activity in the banking industry these days. It's not getting to be less, it's getting to be more. So there are things that you can do to prevent that. You have to do your due diligence. One of them, change your passwords, reconcile your statements. Those are the things that have to be kept up to date. So is going back and forth from treasurer to town accountant. A lot of the jobs is very intertwined. You have to work together often. You have to do a lot of the same things. Sometimes what I do as a treasurer at this job could be a town accountant at another job, and vice versa. So there's a lot of integration, there's a lot of overlap.
Now, this is going to be a new job that's going to be considered a finance director / town accountant, which will have responsibilities of a number of individuals underneath your position. How about in the positions that you were in North Andover, Rockport, and Tingsboro? Did you have supervisory
Yes.
authority over
Yes,
people there?
Yes, I only have 3 staff right now that I supervise. Rockport, I had 2. North Andover, I had 3. So, yes. And I know your treasurer. We've gone to school together for years. I don't hang out personally with her, but, I've hung out with her in different classes, and I get along with her. That can be a shocking challenge when you go from town to town, when I was auditing especially, where they won't talk to each other, and it's just unheard of to me. Like, why can't you just get past that? Just get the job done.
That was always my next question about difficult issues that you face and how you handle those.
Excuse me?
Difficult issues that you may face and how you handle those with maybe employees or something that took place, like you just had mentioned, people not talking to each other,
I've never had it happen when I've been the treasurer or the collector or the town accountant. I've never had that difficulty, like not getting along with people, but I have seen it when I audited that and before I went to Tingsboro, they were in the newspaper, they did not get along, the different offices, and I've heard terrible stories about how they would taunt each other, very unprofessional. It's just, it doesn't get things done. They missed for a dozen years, $500,000. You need to work together. It's that simple.
I heard that you were the one who discovered that
Yes.
issue
Yes.
out there in Tingsboro. Yeah, good.
Thank you, Mr. Carver. Mr. Eaton?
I was actually hoping you would go into a little bit of detail about that issue in Tingsboro to
Sure, I would
educate all of
be
us on
happy to. Yes,
what that's about.
Absolutely. I started at the end of February, and within 2 months, I was reconciling receivables, and I had lists of prior reconciliations in my drawer, and I have, because of my background, I have full access to the general ledger and the ability to look at the treasurer's side, and of course, we're in 2 different softwares. We're in Point for the receivables, and when I printed a list of receivables in Point, it only took up a half a page. I did it. You have to do it per fiscal year, so I'm looking at the oldest year. Should be the easiest to reconcile. I printed, say, 2006, and I have a half page of people's names when I printed on my software, Point. And when I printed on the accountant software, it is, it's a much larger number. It would have had to have filled up, a page and a half for that year. And I found older records that matched the general ledger for different time periods perfectly. And so I kept digging, and there was, what the clerk had done is she had entered batches. She was very meticulous in that she would enter a batch, pocket the cash, and she would take the date in the software system, the deposit date, and edit it and kept editing it. And I believe the first year she did it, she paid the money back. I believe she stole for 13 years, and the first year she paid it back. And then the next dozen years, she didn't have the ability to pay it back. So, and there were many instances when I was putting in the receivable balances into Gateway that I realized that as a treasurer, I have to put the receivable balances in, and the accountant has to sign off on it, that she agrees. And I would have printed them out from my software, and there were just many instances where they should have seen something that should have gone wrong, but they were covered, and they put a lot of trust in one person. When I started, they gave me someone else's password to get into our software, and I said, oh no, let me call the company and get my own password. Just little things, I think, is my auditing background and just having been the accountant, the treasurer in past, it was just easier for me to find the discrepancy.
Was Tingsboro having independent audits during this 13-year
Yes,
period?
and the auditors did what they were supposed to do. They wrote that the collector at the time was elected, and he didn't want to go after people. He didn't want to put people into tax title. But when they wrote it, they didn't just write a management letter comment, oh, he should do that, very generic, no amounts. There's a couple years they'd had that comment in their management letter for 10 years. And some of the years had a generic comment, and some of the years had very specific amounts, that you have $3 million in receivables on your books, why don't you put them into tax title? And I know as a collector, I know my most wanted. I know those people. I have their phone number, I have their email address, I have contact with them, and I'm not elected, so I collect on them. I started foreclosing on them and to what needed to be done, naturally. So I'm surprised that when he read that, he wouldn't say, oh, you're wrong, that is the wrong number. Is a numbers person, someone gives you a number, especially your auditors, you reconcile that and say, you show me how you got that number. I certainly do.
Thank you. I'm going to read just a short clip or a short bit from our most recent independent auditors report that ended the fiscal year, that ended June 30, 2018. The town's liabilities and deferred inflows of financial resources exceeded its assets and deferred outflows of financial resources at the close of the most recent fiscal year by over $16.1 million total net position. Almost $35 million represented a deficit net position of governmental activities, and almost $18.9 million represented net position of the business type activities. This is a two-part question. First, is this cause for panic? And second, speaking more broadly, I was wondering if you could speak to the usefulness of a condensed statement of net position in assessing a municipality's fiscal strength.
Because of your OPEB liability, I'm sure that's the reason why that you had a net negative at year end. I mean, they have to book it.
Yeah.
One of the auditors, I don't know how many years it's been now, realized that, oh my gosh, it's almost like Social Security. We don't have enough money. If everyone retires and they live as long as people are living too long, that's what's happening to all of our retirement systems. We're living too long, and we didn't put enough in at the beginning, so they're increasing the amount we have to put in now. So someone realized that just like Social Security, there's not going to be enough. So the accountants have to record the liability on your financial statements, and that's what that is. And it's confusing. I mean, if you take it out, I mean, there's different layers of your financial statements. There's one that has that, and then there's another one that doesn't. Mm-hmm. To me, that's a clearer picture. Yep. I want to see a snapshot. I'd print your revenues minus your expenditures for the year. Obviously, you have free cash every year. You're a very stable municipality. You're a very strong municipality. You've done a good job planning every year. It's very evident.
So my next question, you've certainly touched upon it. It was any steps you've taken to improve financial controls, aside from the incident with the clerk that was stealing money over a period of 13 years and catching that. Are there any other steps that you've taken to improve financial controls in any number of the communities you've worked with?
Every day. Anytime anything goes wrong, I think there's an opportunity to fix something. It's called tightening internal controls. If something goes wrong, you ask yourself, how can I prevent this from happening going forward? It's been little things, big things. We have a no cash policy. We don't accept cash in excess of $50. And that has allowed me to go, I can bank at different banks. We can wire the funds. We can scan the checks directly to those banks. I mentioned in the last interview that there's just been a lot of manual procedures in North Andover. The treasurer gave me this, she was a sweet woman, she's assistant treasurer, and she'd give me this book for the tax title. It was this, they were heavy, and they were antiques, and this is where you recorded and by hand your tax title takings. And I said, I'm never writing that book. So typically though, even when I start a new job, whether I think it's logical or not, I do what someone else did until I'm 100% positive that this can be done with. They did a lot of transfers between accounts. They had checks in the drawers that they would write to themselves and then deposit to another account. It didn't sound logical, but I did it for a little till I was sure that it was not a good idea, things like that. So I definitely I'm very computer literate, and I know that if there's a button there for a report that I can maneuver it or fix it with the software company to actually use it. They were not using the software in North Andover or Tingsboro to its full capacity. There's just so many reports that the software is capable of just spitting out. They were typing them in this day and age. To type something that you can print out sounds crazy to me. It's just it's a waste of time and effort. And they were in Tingsboro. They were taking the payments from our online payment vendor, Unipay, and they were getting a printout, and they were taking it and manually typing it into the software. That was a silly thing that they were doing. There's just so many.
Okay. Could you describe your experience and current involvement in the preparation of townwide capital and operating budgets?
Right now, I am not hugely involved in the budgets. When I was in Rockport, I was more involved in the budget committee. Budget preparation, I would meet with the different departments and ask them for what they needed for capital projects in the coming year. And we would meet afterwards and discuss which ones were the most important. They had a rating scale to try to figure out, and they would try to use their free cash from the prior year first and try never to borrow. So it was very, very constricted what they could possibly get done each year. Things were very tight. I would also meet with the town manager, the treasurer collector, and the assessor, and we would try to figure out, what our budgeted revenues would be for the things that do fluctuate from year to year, your tax title collections, your motor vehicle excise. I liked your reports in that you really keep track of things in one centralized location, such as your number of excise bills. That's a great idea, so you can have a reason for increasing at a certain percentage, or simple. Great idea.
So have you had an opportunity to review our fiscal 2020 budget, and if so, what are your initial thoughts?
I did, and my first thought was I was impressed that you had it available online. You have a very open community, and it's very detailed, and I liked that it had the number of staff that you had in each department. It worried me a little bit when I saw that the treasurer's staff had increased, but the accountant staff had decreased in the last few years. So I had asked Mike about that, like what happened, and he explained that the payroll and the IT staff went to the treasurers. So that made me feel a little more at ease. It was a nice, thorough budget. I was thrilled to see things like that. You budget for overlay, you budget for free cash. You're not so tight that, if the state cuts your funding, that you have to reduce everyone's budget. I mean, it is not a bad idea to do that. But my first thought was this is a well-run community. Obviously, your bond rating speaks to that as well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Reed. Mrs. O'Mahony?
Hi, Finnegan. So just a couple kind of follow-up questions, I think, more than anything. How have you, if you are comfortable telling people no And how would you handle, or have you handled, kind of potential conflict between department heads while still trying to, you're enforcing the accounting rules and mass general laws, but you're also trying to build kind of that team or, collaborative environment?
Right, I mean, telling people no, I'm a mother. I've been telling people no for over 20 years now. So, and people ask me as a treasurer collector, almost every day they have asked me for many years now, will you waive the interest? And if it's over $15 or the demand fee, I'm not allowed to, in accordance with Mass General Law, to waive anything that's over $15. So I say no a lot. It's not a difficult thing. As far as different departments, I've had problems with a department in Rockport that hadn't followed procurement procedures, and it was a difficult item. I marched my little self over to his office and explained to him that you need to do this, you need to send these items back, but they were already installed. So I was unsuccessful, so I made him promise, and I explained to him the law. You have to get, it wasn't a big deal. You only had to get the 3 phone quotes. It's like, just call someone, get emails. How hard is it to do that? So that has been a difficult item. I mean, obviously, you don't pay things, you send them back if they're not right. It's kind of easy in that respect, unless it's already purchased, already installed. Was a difficult situation.
Okay. And then another kind of follow-up question is, Mr. Eaton had asked you about reviewing our budget. And I see this would be the 4th municipality that you've worked in. So I guess my question is, given your experience with other towns and what you see Wilmington doing, what would be or have been your policies around free cash reserves and bonding?
The policy about free cash, Tingsboro seems to increase their reserves, like the OPEB liability in those reserves from free cash when they can. They're much less robust investments. They don't have the free cash available. What was the question exactly?
Just what have you seen work well, I guess would be a different way of asking it, in the 3 towns that you've worked in previously, and kind of what you know about Wilmington.
To budget for it, to have
what would be your recommendations?
That is a phenomenal idea, to have your budget before the year even begins, to have some allowance, some wiggle room, to budget your revenues a little low, your expenditures a little high. It gives you room to breathe. It gives you a much better end result. You want to have free cash. It's not illegal to do it that way. It's the way it should be done. It's the way other towns should be. Unfortunately, they have too many constraints to be able to do that. We're all stuck with Prop 2.5 and excuse me, we're all stuck with the requirements of Prop 2.5. We can't raise our taxes more than last year's taxes, plus 2.5%, plus new growth, plus any, excuse me, any overrides. So, I mean, so many towns are stuck. They can't meet those. You are in a very good position.
Okay.
It's a wonderful position to be in.
My final question would be, just again, given kind of your transitions from the previous towns, why Wilmington now? What intrigues you about this position?
This position is truly an opportunity for me to use all the skills that I've acquired at these different jobs. And it's a perfect time in my personal life. My kids are grown. My youngest is going away to college. So I have a lot more time on my hands. My first and foremost priority has been for many years my kids and to try to be close to home. I stayed in North Andover for a long time because it was 5 minutes from home, and this is a great commute.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Hull?
Certainly, the accomplishment you spoke about, and I think it is an accomplishment, unfortunate circumstance, certainly in Tingsboro, but by identifying that situation with the fraud, is clearly a major accomplishment. I'm wondering if you can talk about another accomplishment that you would consider pretty significant, either in Tingsboro or in any of your prior positions?
I am a certified Mass Municipal Treasurer. Bartholomew and Company, they were making fun of me because they said I got like one of the highest grades on the exam ever. And I studied for it. I had seen other CPAs that had failed it, so I studied a lot. So I'm a certified Mass Municipal Collector. I'm not as thrilled about that. That wasn't a very difficult test. I'm a certified fraud examiner. I'm more proud of that because when the district attorney was auditing us that year, I think we had 3 or 4 audits, and including the district attorney at our office now and then. The people that were there had not received their certification. They couldn't pass all parts of the exam. So I'm proud of those accomplishments. Those are more personal.
Okay.
Is that?
And at any point in either in your present position or prior positions, are there any particular situations that came up that you think, gee, if I had an opportunity to have a do-over, so to speak, I would have handled that a little differently? And if you could perhaps describe a situation like that, and then what your takeaway was from that circumstance.
There is no do-over button.
No, unfortunately not.
There's no rewind. I can't think of an instance where I thought, oh, if only I could go back. I mean, obviously, we would all like to go back and knowing what you know now, if you could know then what you know now. There wasn't some huge mistake that we had made.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hull. Just a couple brief questions myself. In your past experience at any of your prior communities, could you talk to us a little bit about the relationship you had with perhaps the board or the council that represented the community? Do you have any interaction with those folks?
Sometimes they would just come into my office, ask questions. I had to stand in front of the Board of Selectmen and ask them if they would do a tax amnesty program every 100 years, no, every 20 years or so. The Department of Revenue will allow a tax amnesty program, so instead of charging 16% interest for someone who's in tax title, they allowed it to go down to, I think, say 8%. So I had to speak and address the board for that. I had to address the board for the conversion, but they were already on board. I mean, I was kind of preaching to the choir. The Finance Committee had explained to them why we wanted an integrated system. I can't imagine a Finance Committee that doesn't want an integrated accounting system. It makes no sense the way I have to do things now and post to one software and then to a spreadsheet, and take the spreadsheet and post it to the software. That's not the way things should be. So I have not had a huge amount of interaction with the different committees other than them stopping by and asking different questions. It's usually just one member.
Sure. And certainly I can attest to that, having stopped by Mr. Morris's office quite a few times and learned a lot from him. He likes when I remind people of that, so I'll mention it again. But how about residents? I know for a fact that I've pointed residents in his direction a few times, and he's been able to clarify things that certainly that I wasn't able to. So could you talk to me about how you might handle that if a resident has questions? I know you referred to some angry phone calls in the past, but I know you won't be getting any of those here in Wilmington if given the opportunity. But could you talk us through, what you might have to offer to residents if they have questions about, municipal finance or OPEB or any general issues there?
I'm always happy to answer any questions. I'm giving my current job. They are coming in and they're asking questions on their bill. Why did I get this bill? Why is my assessment so high? And I try to explain to them that your assessment is not really the value of your home right now. We're trying to assess the entire town as one. People ask me why the taxes are so high, and I can give them spreadsheets or listings from the Department of Revenue showing that Tingsboro really, the average tax bill is about the same as here. It's about $6,000. It's really not that high relatively. Your sewer bill is a bargain and a half. I don't say that to them, but it is. I do say that it is a good price comparatively speaking to other towns for what you get for services. They don't have to pay for a lot of things that other towns have been forced to charge for fees. I answer residents' questions every day. So my My biggest problem is that I sometimes over-explain, and a lot of times people thank me for that. You know, that I don't treat them like they couldn't possibly understand what I have to say. This is how we get your tax bill. This is how we figure out what your value is, and this is how we calculate the individual, the CPA, the tax bill. That's a very common question that residents have.
Thank you. So before we give you the opportunity to touch upon anything we might have missed or give us a closing statement, I want to recognize that our Assistant Town Manager is here, along with our current Town Accountant, Mr. Morrison. I want to give you both the opportunity. If you have anything you want to ask or add at this time, feel free.
No, again, we were very happy with this whole process, and as we've had 2 opportunities to listen to the questions and answers, we're quite pleased with those, I think. Not to speak for you.
I would agree.
But I appreciate this whole process has gone very well. It's a bit of a different process than most department heads' positions, being in the public forum and so on and so forth, but thank you.
Thank both of you for being here.
Mr. Chair, just one question if I could. Ms. Finnegan, you were at Rockport for about a year or so. Any reason why you left the accountant position for the?
I loved being an accountant there. I had a great staff. People that I worked with were wonderful. There was no reason to leave other than the commute. I knew that the commute would be long, but I didn't know it would be many days was over an hour. That was the primary reason.
Okay. All right, thank you.
And the town manager at the time was someone that I had worked with in North Andover for Tingsboro, so I knew he would be someone I could get along with. Not that I couldn't get along with anyone, someone just that I knew was just an easygoing, nice guy. So.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions from the board? Okay, so certainly want to give you an opportunity for short closing or touch upon something that we might have not talked about here tonight, and give you a chance for a final statement.
Sure. I think some of my strengths are my ability to get along with other people, my ability to take things that are sometimes very difficult. Borrowing sometimes can be a difficult process, and I can just simplify it down. I'm not a brain surgeon. I like to take difficult things and make them as simple as possible. What else? And I think my past experience being an auditor, being an accountant, being a treasurer, a collector, I think being able to use all those makes me a strong candidate for this position.
Great. Well, I feel comfortable saying that I think I speak for all of us when we say thank you for your willingness to and your desire to want to join our community. And we thank you for your sharing all the things you have to offer with us. And as you know, this is kind of a fluid process. We did interview another individual earlier tonight. After we wrap up with you here, we're going to have a discussion as a board about how to move forward, and we certainly will be in contact with you as soon as possible.
Wonderful. Thank you. I
Okay.
really appreciate the time.
Thank you very much. Okay, so we are a little ahead of schedule, but that's okay. The next thing on our agenda is a discussion with the board about our next steps, how to proceed. So we can certainly open it up any way we want. I don't think we're bound to any particular way we want to handle this. Certainly everything is on the table, so if anybody has anything they want to offer, some thoughts, how we want to move forward. We did tentatively schedule a meeting for next week. That doesn't rule out the idea that we could vote here tonight if some people are comfortable. If we want to meet next week or in the future, everything's on the table. So I'll open it up to anybody who has some thoughts on how we should proceed.
Yeah, Mr.
Skyra?
Chair, I wouldn't be prepared to vote on it tonight. I'd like to take a relook at everything and just go through it and make the right decision, I hope, for the town. But I don't know if we necessarily need to meet again next week just to do a quick discussion and a vote, as opposed to just having it at our regular monthly meeting on the 28th. But that's my only thought. Why come in again for, what could be a 20-minute discussion when we could have it on the 28th? But that's up to my colleagues as to whether they want to come in again.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else have any thoughts? Mr. Eaton?
Yeah, so in each of their application packets on the last page, they each listed 3 references. I certainly agree with Mr. Kyra's point that, this is a significant decision, and certainly didn't draw the crowd that the baseball practices did tonight. But I do think this is a very significant decision for this town, and I would like the opportunity to reach out to their references and also give it a little bit of time. With respect to the timing of it, my preference would be to meet next week, because Mr. Morris's last day is June 12th, and I think
July 12th.
July 12th, I'm sorry. I'm not trying to push you out the door, Mr. Morris, I promise. But I do want to do everything that we can to maximize the overlap between Mr. Morris and whoever we end up choosing to be the finance director, town accountant. And we should at least give some consideration to the fact that both of these individuals are employed with different municipalities, and they would have to provide notice, and they're in positions that 2 weeks' notice is, I think, would probably be cutting it a little bit close. I'm trying to look at my notes. I know, I would expect that each of them would probably have to give about 3 weeks' notice. My preference would be, and hopefully it's a short discussion, and hopefully there's a consensus next week, but hopefully after we have a chance to think about it, speak to references, come here, we can be in and out.
Great, thank you. Anybody else?
I would just agree with Mr. Eaton, given the time frame that we're working off of. I don't know if it would make sense to wait till May 28th. I would hate to see, someone coming in and not have the time that, be afforded the opportunity to work with our current town accountant before he retires. So I'm okay with coming in on May 21st. I just want to thank the people who brought the 2 finalists to us. I think they were both, obviously qualified based on their resume and based on their answers tonight. So I appreciate the work that went into kind of narrowing the field so that we had just the 2 finalists to meet with.
Great, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I too would like to take a few days to digest this, and I don't have a problem coming in May 21st. I mean, I know we talked about doing that, and I don't think we're going to be here long if we do decide to pick the candidate, both great candidates. I just want time to digest, and I agree. I think the 21st would probably be the way to go. Thank you.
Okay. So I think we're hearing that the consensus is that we ought to meet next Tuesday as tentatively scheduled. I think we talked about 7 p.m., and I agree, this would give us an opportunity to digest what we heard tonight, to watch the replay if we need to, thanks to our friends at WCTV, who are usually pretty good about getting it right up online. And then also, most importantly, hear some feedback from residents as well. And so I thought I agree, we had 2 fine candidates here tonight, and I want to thank the committee for their work up front to bring these 2 fine candidates to us, and I look forward to the opportunity to review what happened here tonight a little bit further. So is everybody okay with next Tuesday,
Yeah.
7 p.m., May 21st?
It's fine.
Okay, so we will publish that so that folks will be aware of the public meeting on the 21st. Anything else I might have missed in regards to this? Okay, we can move in. I think we don't have any communications this evening. Are there any announcements from board members? Okay.
Not since Monday.
No. How about new business? Is there any new business? Mr. McCoy?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd just like to take this opportunity. I want to apologize for the other night on how the vote went for appointment members relative to the Hockey Rink Committee. I want to apologize to everyone up here, especially Selectman Eaton and O'Mahony. I'd really appreciate a second chance, so I would offer and make a motion to submit my name again as the second member of the Board of Selectmen to serve on the Hockey Committee, along with Selectman Kyra. I put that as a motion, and I know I could work hand in hand with Mr. Kyra, and this is something I would really, really, truly love to do, and I've been expressing it for months. And once again, I apologize what I said the other night. Thank you.
Okay, and forgive me, because I know I'm fairly new at this here, but I want to be cautious that we don't take up any formal votes under new business. I don't want to put ourselves in a situation where we're in a violation of open meeting, given that that particular motion or any motion hasn't been posted on the agenda. Therefore, residents wouldn't have the opportunity to know that that was going to happen. So what I can offer you is that we could consider putting that on a future meeting as an agenda item, and so that we keep ourselves clean here tonight.
All right, yeah, I'm not going to have a problem with the chairman. I think that we wouldn't be violating anything, but I'd appreciate the consideration, people to digest that. I mean, I do offer it as a motion. I don't think that by doing this that we would violate any open meeting law. We've done it in the past. And if there's not a second, then so be it. I understand that, but, you know, I would appreciate it if you would allow me to put that motion together now. I don't believe it's a violation. I don't think it's a violation. And it's something that I think that we could do. And I'm willing to accept it either way.
I'll second it just for discussion at this point. I would have to kind of go back and really look into the open meeting law implications, if any, but certainly, I mean, we just agreed we're going to be meeting on Tuesday, so we want to put this on the agenda right after that. I mean, I think it would be 2 quick votes. I'm not suggesting we're going to be staying here till 10 o'clock at night to talk about this, but
But good, I have no problem with the motion. It's just that the timing of it, again, we're here with a posted agenda. Residents had the opportunity to come see this. This is what we came prepared to meet upon. And now this is something new that we weren't prepared for. So I have no problem with it being considered for a future agenda item if you would be so willing to hold off. But again, regardless of open meeting law or not, residents didn't know we were going to take a vote on that. So I'm hesitant to do so. That's my hesitation.
Mr. Chair, I would echo your sentiments, and I know there have been instances in the past where new business has been considered in kind of a perhaps broader perspective than it should be, but you know, we had the recent open meeting law discussion with Attorney Rich, and I think even though some practices may have gone on in the past, it doesn't necessarily mean they were the best practice. And the Attorney General's office looks at the open meeting law and regularly reviews the circumstances for how open meeting laws are conducted. You know, I think the intent in general is if there was some reasonable expectation to know that a topic could be discussed, it should be posted in advance so that residents have an opportunity, if they so choose, to either attend the meeting and offer, or at least attend the meeting, or you know, view it on TV. So I just would caution the board about taking up matters for discussion and particularly for votes that have not been posted.
Mr. Chairman, if you want, I'm happy to withdraw it. You stated a few minutes ago that you'd be willing to put it on the next agenda for the next meeting on the 21st. If that's what you're going to do, then I'd be happy to withdraw it, what you said, if that's what you're going to do.
Yeah, maybe I'll just follow up that by saying to all my colleagues, I certainly want to extend the courtesy to everyone as chair. The same treatment that I've been given by past chairs since my short time being on the board is that I'm happy to consider any items to be on the agenda that a board member wishes to bring forward, and should simply run it by the manager, or simply if you don't feel comfortable bringing it to me, you could certainly bring it to the manager. And I believe it's the Thursday before that we set the
right.
agenda. I look forward to doing that for the first time with you soon, but I'm happy to consider anything to put it. But again, just in an effort to be totally transparent for the residents, I'm hesitant to vote on anything that hasn't been posted on the agenda. And so that was my hesitation for this evening.
All right, and I have no problem withdrawing it with the understanding we do have ample time to advertise it. And if you can put this on the agenda for the next meeting, I'd be happy, and I would really love to work with Mr. Kyra as a second member on that. But I withdraw that right now, Mr. Chairman.
Can I just inquire, is there a rink committee meeting scheduled for the committee already, or is that still in process?
No, we will be sending out notice with some dates, looking to try to get a common date for everybody, so that has not yet happened. but
Okay,
will.
so it's not that there's a meeting that anyone would be missing if they're not currently on the committee.
That's right.
I would respect, the I believe this was a discussion before I was on the board, that was earlier this year about announcements and new business and how that would be handled, so I respect, your position that new business is not gonna be where motions should be made. I talked with Mr. McCoy about this. I understand he really wants to be on it, which is still why it's baffling to me what happened on Monday. I'm only on this board guaranteed for a year, so I'd like to start doing some work. So I'm more than happy to have this on an agenda, but I'd like it to be the hopefully final time we're having the discussion before the committee even meets. Respectfully.
Thank you.
Just through the chair, I think the committee has been formulated, I think it's been finalized, and I don't think we need to go any further with it. But just for, I guess, curiosity's sake, Ms. O'Mahony mentioned that Mr. McCoy talked to you about this issue. Did Mr. McCoy speak to anybody else about this issue?
Yeah, Mr. McCoy and I spoke about this as well.
So this is a violation of the open meeting law, that he did talk to...
There was not
other-
three people present. There was
No,
not three people
no, it's still,
involved.
an issue of a vote is still a violation of open meeting law. So that should
Respectfully
just end
disagree
the
with that.
issue right then and there, as far as I'm concerned.
Well, here's what I'm
And
hearing.
it's been finalized.
Here's what I'm hearing. It sounds like there is some important discussion to be had. I'm happy to put it on the next agenda for our next meeting. That way, we all have the opportunity to prepare for that. The residents at home have the opportunity to prepare for that to be discussed, and we can take it up then.
Yeah, and I may be mistaken, as Mr. Eaton is pointing out, but I would suggest that town manager reach out to town council to see if Mr. McCoy violated the open meeting law by discussing this issue in regards to a vote with two other selectmen, please.
If I may, Mr.
Sure.
Chairman, Mr. McCoy called me, reached out to apologize, I think, because it was my first meeting as a member of the board. So I respect that phone call, but I did say to him on the phone, and any conversation I have with any of you is going to be something that I'm more than happy to share. I don't have off-the-record conversations making any kind of side agreements of any sort. I did point out to him that I was baffled because, he referenced it before I was even on the board when I was in the audience. He referenced it at the Special Olympics. So I knew it was something he really wanted, and I just couldn't understand why he had rescinded the option basically on Monday night. And I did say, should you get it in front of the board for a vote again? He asked for my support, and I said I'm here for collaboration. I'm not here for division. And that was the extent of the conversation. I don't know what his conversation was with Mr. Eaton. I wasn't privy to that. But, that's the conversation that happened yesterday. And again, I respect that there are rules we should be following. I respect that there's process. I respect the chairman's, decisions and implementation of those. But I also respect that, I was voted by the community to be on this board to help make good things happen. And I don't want to spend a lot of time on things like this, to be quite honest with you.
I just wanted to call to apologize. All I want to do is try to help our kids in the community. I said I want to do everything in my power to try to make this happen. I'm very passionate, I think you know that. I've said it over the last 3 meetings. I've talked to other folks. I said, hey, I would really want to help folks. That's all I'm trying to do, is help our kids, the youth hockey, figure skating, whoever's out there. We need to take a wrong and make it a right. I've been going on 30 years on this Board of Selectmen, and it's a shame how we got treated by Mr. Restuccia, working out a deal with Mr. Rotundo. I believe we were just a pawn in this whole thing for him to make more money. I believe I'm right. I know I'm right. All I'm here, Mr. Carr, is to help folks, and I want to help those kids. That's my sole goal. Not looking to put money in my pocket, not looking to do anything of that. I just care about this community. I've lived in this community for 60 years. I'm 60 years old, and I figured if I could reach out to the elder crowd like myself to support our youth in this town. That's all I'm trying to do. And I rescind, if I can take back that motion. If you can put it on the agenda, that's all. And I would I would move on. If I am fortunate enough at a second chance at this, Mr. Kara, I want to work with you. I'm going to put my hand out and shake your hand. I want to work with you for the best of the community. That's all I want to do. I'm not trying to put
I
anything
want
in
to
my
work for the best
pocket.
of the community too, Mr.
All right, no, I know
McCoy.
you are. We all are. And I'm happy to withdraw that, Mr. Chairman.
Sure, I'll
and
accept that.
That's all. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, just briefly,
Sure.
because I think I should at least address the substance of the conversation that I had with Selectman McCoy, similar to how Selectman O'Mahony is characterizing her conversation with Selectman McCoy. Mr. McCoy did reach out to me yesterday. He did apologize because for how the conversation went. On Monday, he'd accused me of razzle-dazzle, which is easily the first and I'm sure the last time that anybody will ever accuse me of razzle-dazzle. But it was more in I found it to be a professional, just, you know, it was an apology. So it was a brief conversation. I just gotten off the train and that was that. So I agree. I know I spoke to it on Monday. I really don't want to be having arguments over who's going to be on committees or not, because I think if we were all elected to serve the residents, and if there's multiple people that are passionate about an issue, great, that's a good thing. Let's go to work.
Thank you. And I'll say, if somebody's been on 30 years, I made a rookie mistake the other night, and I made a rookie mistake. Unfortunately, we're human.
Mr. Chair, just to be clear, is it the wish of the board for me to consult with council as to whether this is a open, this, as I understand it, what was a independent conversation between Selectman McCoy and Selectman O'Mahony, and a separate independent conversation between Selectman McCoy and Selectman Eaton? Is it the desire of the board for me to consult with council as to whether that is an open meeting law violation?
I'm fine with that.
I mean, I would just say, anytime someone requests for that consultation, I would err on the side of caution. So if that request is being made by one of my members, I would always support that.
Yeah, I think it's been asked by one of the members, and so you gotta just make sure we're in the clear.
Okay.
Is there any other new business from any members?
I've got something else, but I can yield to my colleagues
No,
here.
the floor is yours.
I just want to bring something up to the manager. You know, from what I understand, there's an interim draft plan relative to Olin site from EPA, which part of the remediation basically is to turn on the wells that were shut down because of contamination caused by the Olin site, and to turn them back on now, 17 years later, to send contaminated water to our filtration system in the town of Wilmington. I'm hearing that. And I'd just like to know, relative to, has Dan Deutsch, our special town counsel, or better yet, even Geo Insight, have they been informed of this? And what is their opinion? And from what I understand, Jeff, it looks like by May 22nd, which is next week, that's the cutoff time for any written response to the EPA. And I would hope to get an answer, say, maybe from you tonight, you know, what's the position, and matter of fact, what's the position of the Board of Selectmen? I mean, tell me, you know, if I'm wrong, tell me, please, but that's what I'm understanding. They want to take that contaminated water and shoot it down to our filtration plant to recycle it and then to put it
Can I
out?
just inquire before you answer, Mr. Hull? Did I miss something? Was information given to, like, what's the source of that information, Mr. McCoy? Because was it something sent to us that we all should have been privy to? Because this is the first I'm hearing.
A constituent did talk to me about this, and evidently, I guess,
Who talked to you about this?
I said a constituent.
Okay.
A constituent talked to me about this, and I'm just bringing this forward, like, hey, for 30 years, when a constituent has a need, like I'm sure anyone else, you know, you bring their needs and wants to the board. That's what we practice, and that's what we
Right, when
preach.
deadlines are referenced, I'm just really
That's what I'm saying,
concerned
that's what I'm concerned
where
about.
that comes from.
Jeff, is this accurate, that May 22nd is basically the deadline for written comments? If that's the case, we need to ask for an extension. Number two, what's the position of the Board of Selectmen? I mean, am I wrong? And that's what's happening? That's what I like to talk about.
Sure. First of all, this is news to me that there's a proposal for Olin to activate contaminated wells and run that water into the public drinking water system, if that's what you're suggesting, or into the
Well, we shut
town's
down-
water treatment plant. I'm just unaware of that. I guess, you know, one of the things that I've tried to suggest to each of the members of the board, and I try to do the same myself, is that when information comes to my attention, I try to provide it to the board to avoid surprises, and I, you know, ask that the reciprocal be done. So, you know, it's a surprise to me to hear about this now. I'll certainly look into it, but I have no knowledge of plans for the town's wells that have been deactivated since 2004 or 5, whatever, I guess it was 3 or 4, whatever that date was, to be reactivated and send that water to our water treatment plants.
From what I understand, that's supposed to be part of the remediation plan from the EPA, is to basically to open up the wells we shut down with the Maple Meadow aquifers, from what I believe. And first, I don't know where we would go from this point. This is what I was told. That's part of the remediation of the EPA? I mean, if we don't know that.
Written report, again, I just
Yeah, I
would
know.
ask, is there any written report that the constituent
Yeah,
was
just-
basing this information on? Because
Yeah.
I can't comment on what our position would be without knowing the
Yeah.
source of the information that we're supposedly
I just found this out
discussing.
prior to the
And
meeting,
through
and
the
I
chair.
understand.
Can I,
this. I'm
chance
sorry.
to
Yeah,
chime
through
in?
the chair to the manager, I would think that Mr. Woods would have been the first on the phone to you if this was going to be, this was going to take place.
Yeah, there are certainly periodically comment documents that are submitted by Olin as they're going through the various steps of complying with EPA's requirements. And I can't off the top of my head recall whether there is a comment document, or a document out there that requires a comment by May 22nd. I do recall something in the last few weeks that, and typically what happens is that I'm copied on the communication, as is Mike Woods and Shelley Newhouse, the health director. And once if Geo Insight isn't copied on those documents, they're immediately forwarded to them with the instructions to provide us with any comments or guidance that they may have. I do recall that there was a document here in the last perhaps 3 or 4 weeks, and I'd have to go back and look at the exact nature of it, but I don't recall any suggestion that the intent was to turn on the town's 5 deactivated wells and direct water into our water treatment plant. That's just not something I
I'm
recall.
glad to hear that, and, that's why somebody brought it up just a little while ago today. I thought I'd bring it up because I realized come next week, other than the special meeting we have next week, we're not gonna have a selectmen's meeting.
So
That's
how
why I
about-
brought it up.
How about this? We can have Jeff, if you don't mind, follow up with that tomorrow, perhaps Dan Deutsch, your department heads, and see if you can find anything out about that and
Right.
provide us an update as soon as you can.
If there's
Yes.
no truth to that, amen.
Yeah, can I just make, if there's any documentation behind that information, if that could be shared, if the constituent's
Yeah.
watching and feels comfortable sharing it through Mr. McCoy, I'm concerned, I'm a big
Yeah.
fan of facts supporting theories and not theories creating facts. So my concern is that now being said, for the 6 people watching still, are gonna now be worried about their drinking water, and the reality is I'd love to see what that information is based on, so that we can actually formulate a response if one is needed. But, just kind of hearing a constituent saying there's a deadline for
Written
some type of
comments.
crazy plan is
Written
a little
comments.
bit concerning.
Yeah, that's why I brought it up tonight, because I just heard of
Yeah,
it
if
today.
there's any reports or documents that you have, I'd love to see
Right.
where that's coming from.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Is there any other new business this evening? Okay, so thank you for providing an update on that when you can.
Yes.
And we will conclude with important dates.
I don't have my agenda here, so the important dates, Pan Mass Challenge Bike, Kids Bike Ride is on May 19th, Carter Lane, 8 a.m. to 12 p.m. May 27th, Memorial Day Parade, 10 a.m., ceremonies at Wildwood Cemetery, 11 a.m. Town offices will be closed. And then the next regularly scheduled meeting of the Board of Selectmen is May 28th, here at 7 p.m. And of course, the special meeting of the board will be next Tuesday, starting at 7 p.m.
Okay, thank you very much. So lastly, is there a motion to adjourn?
So,
Motion's made, seconded by Mr. McCoy. Is there any discussion on that? All in favor? It's unanimous. Good night, ladies and gentlemen.